Let's make this easy French bread using the dough cycle on our bread machine.
Hey y'all, welcome to Robyn on the Farm. Today I'm going to be making a loaf of French bread, and I'm going to use my bread machine dough cycle to help me make it. I love French bread. I like to eat it with my pasta, soups, salads, but I also just like it just by the slice. I love French bread with just a little bit of butter on it. Oh, so good. French bread's considered a lean dough because it doesn't have added like milk or eggs or oil or butter. It doesn't have any of that, so it's considered a lean dough. It only has 5 ingredients, so it's super simple just to throw everything into your bread machine bread pan and then let the dough cycle do the work for us. So let me just show you how to make it. Super simple. I love this recipe. I know you're gonna like it. We're gonna start with 1 1/4 cups of hot water. This is about 110 degrees. So just throw that into your bread machine bread pan. Next, we want 2 teaspoons of sugar. Now, traditional basic French bread only has 4 ingredients. That would be flour, salt, yeast or sourdough starter, and water. Only those 4. Mine has just 2 teaspoons of sugar because it just makes it that much better. So I'm gonna do 2 teaspoons of sugar. If you wanna leave it out, you can, but it tastes that much better with these 2 teaspoons of sugar in it. So just trust me on that. All right, now we want 2 teaspoons of yeast. Now, this is my active dry yeast that I always use. You can use any kind of yeast you want. You can use the bread machine yeast, you can use active dry yeast like this, you can use instant yeast, rapid rise, whatever you want, but 2 teaspoons of yeast, okay? Now, right on top of that, I am going to put in 2 teaspoons of salt. The salt is really important in French bread. If you don't have salt, it's gonna taste terrible, so make sure you put in 2 teaspoons of salt, okay? Now, on top of all that, you want 3 cups of flour. Now, this is all-purpose flour. So that's a little bit different. I usually use bread flour and everything. This is all-purpose flour for French bread. But if you only have bread flour by chance, you can use bread flour. But this is all-purpose flour, so you want 3 cups of all-purpose flour. Just throw that in there. 3 cups. Okay. And those are all of our ingredients. So simple, isn't it? Water, yeast, salt, flour, sugar. That's it for this French bread. So easy. Okay, now you're gonna put your bread pan back into your bread machine, and I'm gonna choose the dough cycle and press start. Okay, so my dough cycle is 1 hour and 28 minutes. Yours should be about there, about 1 hour and a half. So in 1 hour and a half, this will have mixed it up, kneaded it, let it rise, and then it'll be ready to shape into a French bread loaf. So I will show it to you at that point.
This is what you want your dough to look like just a few minutes into the dough cycle. Shouldn't be too wet, too sticky, or too dry. It should look just about like this.
All right, it's been 1 hour and a half. You can see the cycle is complete. There is our French bread dough. That is exactly what you want your dough to look like when the dough cycle is complete. Okay, so I'm just gonna give it a good punch down. After you've punched your dough down, go ahead and get it out of your bread loaf pan. Just turn it out onto the counter. Now, I am just going to press out my dough. Now, I want it to be long, you know, like a regular French bread loaf. So we're going for a long shape for a loaf, and it's a little bit tricky. You just gotta kind of pull on it, press on it. You can use a rolling pin if you want to, but I'm not gonna pull mine out. But I want mine to be about as long as my baking sheet. I'm using my cast iron baking sheet. I oiled it up really good, but I want my loaf to be about that long. So that's what I'm gonna use for my guide. Now I'm just gonna roll it up. Okay, I'm gonna roll it up nice and tight. Like I always say, there's no real science to this. Just roll it up real good. And then kind of tuck in your ends. Try to get it kind of uniform so it's not like really fat in the middle and skinny at the ends or anything like that. Just kind of work it a little bit. This isn't a dough that's going to get messed up if you overwork it. You can kind of mess with it for a while and it'll be just fine. Okay, now I'm just going to plop it on my loaf pan like this. And I am going to just let this rise for 20 minutes. Okay, so in 20 minutes, I'll show you the next step. Okay, I just got my oven preheating to 375 degrees, And here is our loaf of French bread so far. Now, I kind of shaped it a little funny, but I think it's totally fine. Like I say around here, I'm not going for perfection, I'm going for homemade, and homemade can look rustic and imperfect, and it's totally fine. So, here's my loaf so far. Now, time for the next step. The next step is to do an egg wash. Now, what you're gonna do is you're gonna crack an egg into a little bowl and add a teaspoon of water. This is the egg wash. Kind of wash this egg wash all over your bread without making a huge mess. Now, you definitely don't want to press down too hard. You don't want to let your bread collapse. So keep that in mind as you are just painting this egg wash on. You also don't want it to get all over your baking sheet because it can kind of burn on there when you're baking your bread. So try just to get it right on your loaf. Now, this is totally optional. You do not have to do this egg wash if that's just too much of a pain for you, because I understand that. But it's never gonna look quite right if you don't do this egg wash. It's not gonna have that shiny, good crust that you picture for French bread. So keep that in mind also. So you don't have to do this egg wash, but it might not look shiny and beautiful. Okay, when you feel like you have your egg wash kind of painted all over your loaf of French bread, then that is perfect. Now, you're gonna take a knife and you're gonna cut some slits in it. Now, this is going to help your bread not to burst while it's baking so that it doesn't lose its shape. So these are kind of like vents, and it's gonna help the air to escape and not like burst. So these are important. It also makes it just look really pretty, I think. So there we go. So there is my loaf of French bread so far. Now, once the oven is done preheating to 375 degrees, then I'm gonna throw this in there and I'm gonna let it bake for 25 minutes. Okay, so I will show it to you when I get it out of the oven. All right, our French bread made using the dough cycle of the bread machine is fresh out of the oven and it looks great. Now, I have to admit, it's not the prettiest one I've ever made. It's a little bit funky looking, but it's totally fine. It's homemade, it's gonna taste amazing. So, here it is. Do you see what the egg wash did to this? Do you see how pretty and shiny and golden that egg wash made this? That's why I like doing the egg wash. You don't have to do that, but it's gonna be a lot more pale and not shiny, so that's what the egg wash does. That's why it's totally worth it to take that extra step, take that extra time, and do that extra step. Let's go ahead, let's cut into it. It is too hot to cut into, but I'm gonna cut into it anyway. It's gonna be so yummy. Oh my goodness, this looks so good. Now, if you wanted to make more like baguette style French bread, like the longer, skinnier ones, you could totally just divide this in half and make some long, skinny loaves. Look at that. Oh my goodness, that looks so good. You see, it's totally soft and fluffy, so yummy. Like I said, it goes great with salad, soups, pastas. I really like to cut it in half this way and make those French bread pizzas out of it. That is yummy. That is so good. So, it's really hot. I'm gonna take a little bite and try it out. So good. So you know those loaves of bread when you walk into the grocery store, those long loaves in the brown bags? This is that same French bread like that, but this tastes so much better. This is so much more fresh and so much better. And this doesn't have any of those preservatives or anything like that that they could be putting into those. So make your own French bread. It's so fast, it's so easy. It'll keep you from going to the grocery store and spending money on things that you don't need to buy. So try out this bread recipe. I know you're really gonna like it. It is one of my very, very favorites. Thanks for being here with me on Robyn on the Farm. Let me know where you're watching from. I've heard from several of you that are watching from Cuba and Sweden, and I just think it's the coolest thing ever that people are watching little old me out in the country from these exotic, crazy places all over the world. I think it's so cool. So if you're watching from somewhere like that, let me know. Or just let me know what state you're from, because that would just make my day too.
I will put the recipe for this easy bread machine French bread down in the description. I'll see you next time on Robyn on the Farm.